So first, I kind of just want to start off with we created a district-wide strategic plan where we were focusing on in our student experience portion of that, diversifying our staff. And so this was work that we started about a year and a half ago, just recognizing the importance of representation within our staff so that our students feel represented and that we work to increase our staff of color. And so I'm just going to highlight some areas of kind of the backstory. We almost are working backwards a little bit, but still moving ahead at the same time. So our area within the HR department is specific to recruitment, development of processes and systems that would allow capacity and continue to build on that. So those are the areas that I'm going to kind of highlight and still talk about the work that we're doing with GTL just as we are entering into our third session. So talking about our district, just giving you a little background to our district. Reynoldsburg is just east of Columbus, Ohio. We are about 8,000 students with 15 schools. And within our school population, we have 70% of our students are BIPOC, and specifically 38% of those students are Black and 15% Asian. So we are pretty diverse, and looking at our staff, there are definitely gaps. When we look at our staff, we are 86% white and 5% Black. There are about almost 10%, 7% of our staff that did not identify their race, so there is a little gap there. It was a 62% gap in our parity report. So students or our staff, non-white staff, and our BIPOC population of students is a 62% gap. So we definitely know that the gaps exist. Our problem is, where do you go? Where do you start with this? You know, we see that there's a disparity. Now what? And so moving forward, what GTL has really helped us identify our barriers in our historical data, and then how do we move forward even though we don't have, and I think Betty touched on this, even though we don't have a good minority hiring funnel. I don't have the data to create that. So what do I do? That was one of the biggest barriers that we recognized early on in our sessions with GTL. So what we decided to do is we're still going to move forward, but I think we're going to start a little bit with our qualitative data and then move forward. I'm trying to figure out systems now that we can create a better minority hiring funnel. So we partnered with Ohio Department of Education. We actually granted an award for diversifying the education profession. We just were granted that just this year. And so we almost have this merge that we're trying to do and move forward with GTL and use leverage the grant opportunities so that we can continue progressing while we also identify our systems. So we partnered with Patel for Kids within that grant to develop an action plan to move forward and working with identifying what our students look like, what our staffs look like, and trying to merge those so that we use the data from our diversity labs and root cause analysis and move forward with the grant. So really it kind of came simultaneously. And how do you juggle all of those things and continue to move forward where everyone is on the same team? So we developed a diversity task force, similar to what Betty talked about with administration, teachers, community members, support staff. We too have our union president on that. And then we identified some areas that we'd like to focus on and brought those to our GTL sessions. We really utilized the problem statement session that we just had. We really worked through that and had some dynamic conversations about, well, what is the problem and what can we start with? So what we identified as our problem first that we'd like to at least look at while we build the capacity to build better data with our candidate selection is that we're not selecting applicants of color because we do not have a coherent recruiting plan. You know, who's hiring? Do they know what they're looking for? Do we know what our ideal educator looks like? Are we all consistent with those? Can be a huge reason why we're not able to hire a diverse staff. And so we identified some areas and root causes. We used that worksheet that was provided from GTL and identified our recruiting practices are not diverse enough to reach a diverse population. District branding is a concern that might have implicit biases in our branding that we would like to take a look at. We are developing state interviews because we too want to know, uh, does our staff of color trust us? Why aren't they staying? Why are they staying? What makes our district appealing to our diverse population within the district now? We're also looking at where do we recruit? Are we being intentional about recruiting and who we are advertising open positions for? All those things have really not been addressed. And so we started with that problem of practice first since our qualitative data is thin. So I want to encourage you if you are having problems with, we don't even ask our applicants what their ethnicity is or what their race is. It's not even a question on our applicant process. But what that did do is elicit some conversation with our legal to talk about how can we get those questions onto our application process. So that's not even data that we've even talked about creating, but now that we've gone through these GTL sessions, it definitely is something that we would like to draw from. So we have that in process right now with our legal team, because obviously some of you can attest there might be some issues, legality with asking that question on our application about what is your race. So we're working through some of those barriers, but at the same time, still trying to move forward with saying our whole process, we don't even have a good solidified plan for hiring and recruiting that includes diversity within it. So let's start there. We're developing a portrait of an educator. We already have a portrait of a grad. And so what does our portrait of an educator look like? And starting with that, we move forward then to conducting stay interviews, which I touched on. And then focusing on our recruitment materials. Our communications director is part of our diversity team so that she can work with us on how we're branding ourselves. All those things are moving parts, which we're trying to do in this first year and move forward. So our whole goal as a diversity team is no matter what, we're going to move forward. We're not going to keep stating the problem. We're not going to keep talking about what we don't have, but instead we're going to create action plans and move it forward. So kind of moving while we're creating these systems in place that can help us build